From KC24, your local election headquarters, with your host, Alexan Balakian. This is Sunday Morning Matters.
Hey, good Sunday morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm Alexan Balakian. You're welcome to join the conversation at Real Alexan. Use the hashtag Sunday Morning Matters. Along the way, Parlier Mayor Alma Beltran in studio as a new water act was introduced in her city. Will it gain traction on Capitol Hill? But first, a Valley congressman finds himself smack dab in the middle of the impeachment investigation.
Certainly, the phone records show that there was considerable coordination among the parties, including the White House.
One of those parties that the House Intel Committee Chair Adam Schiff is talking about is Congressman Devin Nunes. In a 300-page report released by House Democrats, new phone records show at least 4 calls were exchanged between Nunes and President Trump's personal attorney Rudy Giuliani. It doesn't state what was said in those phone calls. It happened back in April. In an interview with Fox News, Nunes said those calls had nothing to do with Ukraine. Nunes says the calls were centered around the Mueller investigation. House Democrats now looking into an ethics investigation against Nunes. Now, on the same day he was implicated in that 300-page impeachment report, Congressman Nunes filed a near $500 million defamation lawsuit against CNN. The suit was filed in Richmond, Virginia. Nunes is seeking punitive damages in the amount of $435 million. Nunes accuses CNN of being, quote, the mother of all fake news. The lawsuit is based off a CNN report claiming an associate of Rudy Giuliani accused Nunes of playing a critical part in President Trump's alleged attempt to get political dirt on Joe Biden from Ukraine by using taxpayer dollars to fund a trip to Vienna to meet with the former Ukrainian official.
And you had CNN wrote a story 10 days ago that said I was in Vienna meeting with a guy named Shokin from Ukraine. It's totally false. And so CNN needs to retract the story. They need to come to court so that we can work this out, mediate it. It's not okay to have fake news in this country any longer, and I'm not going to stand for it. In any normal situation with a media that's really covering this, this would not have been tolerated.
Nunes says that he did not travel to Vienna or anywhere else in Austria in 2018. Nunes says he was in Libya and Malta around the time of the alleged meeting. The lawsuit also says that Nunes has never met Shokin. Nunes has other lawsuits pending against Twitter for $250 million and McClatchy, the owner of the Fresno Bee, for $150 million. So all that on top of the House Judiciary Committee laying down constitutional groundwork for impeachment and the House Speaker, yes, confirming articles of impeachment will move forward in the House. Lots to digest here. To help us sort this all out, the former federal U.S. District Judge hired by President George H.W. Bush, Oliver Wanger. How are you, sir? Good to see you.
Thank you.
Well, it's been a while since we talked to you, and I want to start with Devin Nunes and this phone log that they have in the impeachment report, that 300-page report. While it may look suspicious, on page 46, it only has a few sentences where Nunes shared conversations or phone calls with Giuliani, but we don't know what's in those phone calls. Does this warrant an ethics investigation?
Well, that's the point. And based on what we have seen, as long as the primary motivation is political, the answer is there's going to be an investigation. Whether or not there are sufficient facts and the law would support it is an entirely different issue.
But with an ethics investigation, it's not about the law per se, right? It's about the ethical reasoning behind these phone calls.
Well, that is, again, subjective, and unless it is defined by the law, quite frankly, it is going to be an interpretation, again, that is going to result in a political decision as opposed to a legal decision.
Yeah. Is it called, and forgive me because I'm not a lawyer, you are, is it circumstantial evidence, as they call it?
Well, the answer is if someone testifies or if they write something, that is direct evidence. If somebody says that they heard somebody say something, that's hearsay. That is circumstantial evidence. That is not admissible. And so the answer is we don't see any direct evidence yet.
Well, a lot of lawyers have gone on CNN and other networks and said Nunes should lawyer up. He should have recused himself from the proceedings. Right or wrong?
The answer is wrong. He has a lawyer. He's filed 3 different lawsuits. He sued McClatchy in 2018. He sued Twitter in 2019. Now in the state of Virginia, in the federal court in Virginia, he has sued CNN. And so the answer is he is the senior political member of the Intelligence Committee. It would be an abdication of his responsibility and his duty to recuse himself.
He should have recused himself.
Should not.
Should not.
Should not recuse himself.
Should not recuse
Absolutely.
himself. Absolutely. Even now, he says he made phone calls with Giuliani. They've done that numerous times.
And the answer to that is, so what?
Yeah.
What was the content of the calls? If somebody has the content, let's hear what it is.
Okay. I want to get to the defamation lawsuit, as you mentioned, against CNN.
Absolutely.
I have it here. It's a 47-page lawsuit for $435 million.
$350 million.
Yeah.
That's right. Good luck.
Will he get his day in court is really the question here.
Well, that's a real question. He has sued in Virginia. Virginia is known, the federal courts there, as the rocket docket. You don't spend years waiting to go to trial. The answer is, if he were in California, he would be facing what is called the anti-SLAPP law, which says that if you are essentially publishing information that has to do with the public interest, that has to do with the legislature, the judiciary, or the executive branch, that in effect you're immune. You can have the case dismissed before it even starts. That's not going to happen in Virginia. But the real answer is all of this. He says, one, he never met with the
Victor Shokin.
Shokin.
Yep.
Shokin says he never talked. He says he was never in Austria in 2018. He says these are lies, and this is, quite frankly, vengeance on the part of CNN because he won't communicate with CNN. That's his story.
Yeah, that's his story. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Has a suit like this ever been won by a plaintiff?
Well, nobody's ever won $435 million, I tell you that, in a defamation suit. But what he's facing is this. He has to show in defamation under the United States Supreme Court decision that actual malice has been used. Actual malice means knowledge of falsity, that what you are saying is absolutely false, or a reckless disregard for the truth. Now, he says that these 2 individuals identified as CNN, if you will, employees, have set him up. This was, quite frankly, something to punish him.
A political hit job.
That's what he called it.
Yeah, I want to move on to the House Judiciary Committee.
Yes.
They laid the constitutional groundwork for impeachment this week. They had a panel of 4 professors. 3 scholars say President abused his power as president. That falls under an impeachable offense. 1 scholar who said he doesn't support Trump, he's actually a Democrat, believes the evidence by the House Democrats is wafer thin. All right, so we've had you on during the early moments of the impeachment phase, and you said there was no grounds for impeachment. After listening to everything that's transpired now, you say what?
That we're going to see an impeachment which is voted upon and which will be confirmed by the Democrats, and it will be defeated in the Senate by the Republicans. This is all politics.
This is all politics. Is there grounds for impeachment? Did the president abuse his power? He said, President Zelensky of Ukraine, do me a favor, or else, and the military aid was held up until after he knew about the whistleblower.
If those facts are accepted as true by a preponderance of the evidence, that would be sufficient under Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution, because impeachment is the charging of a public official who has engaged in misconduct. And of course, the kind of misconduct that we are talking about here is an abuse of office, which would mean interfering with the electoral process. We don't necessarily see that happening, except the inference is if you are trying to get information that would be negative
on Joe Biden.
That's right. To your opponent, that would have a political implication, and that could be, quite frankly, a negative influence on the electoral process. But in addition, is it for personal gain? Well, if he wins, you could argue that that's personal gain. Would it in any way compromise our national interest or our national security? We don't see that necessarily.
So you're saying at this point in time, I just got a few seconds here.
Okay.
Not impeachable to what you've seen so far.
What we heard, the three of the experts who were the law professors were selected by the Democrats. One was a Democrat and an anti-Trump person, but he said insufficient time for the kind of investigation necessary, insufficient evidence relative to the other impeachments that have actually been held. There are two of them in modern times that have occurred, Nixon and Clinton. Mm-hmm. And so in the final analysis, again, if this were something other than politics, the answer would be different.
The answer would be, okay, I got literally 1 second. They're telling me to rap in my ear. I hear you, but I got to ask you this.
Absolutely.
Real quick, yes or no? Is this an impeachable offense because you think the House Democrats don't like President Trump and they can't beat him in the election? Do you think that's what it is, or is this an impeachable offense? Yes or no?
The answer is, if I were a mind reader, I could answer that question, but I don't have that skill or ability. The answer is, as quite frankly, a judge, and having spent over 20 years in the court and 52 years in the law, the answer is the evidence is insufficient that has been presented.
Okay.
Politically, will it work? Maybe. Okay. Doubtful.
All right. Oliver Wanger, we appreciate you, sir. A lot to digest there. And so we'll call on our panel to do that. How big of a mess is Congressman Nunes actually in? And was there a winner in the constitutional impeachment battle royale? Next.